Greetings, my Lord of the Rings, friends and nerds. Friends, nerds, and folk alike. Today we come to a great tale. A great, great tale in the story of the Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien's wonderful books. Hope you're doing well this morning. I want to read two passages from The Two Towers, and obviously you can observe my artwork. I drew it this morning, Helms Deep. Kind of looks a little bit childlike, but I do my best. It's every artist has their own craft, every poet their own skill with words, and I think to be able to do a multitude of things well is a good thing. There are obviously many greater artists than I online. You can find them on YouTube. I actually found this one girl's channel. You can go check it out if you want. I don't remember it right off the top of my head, but you can check it in my subscriptions. I subscribe to her channel. She's at about the same subscribers as me, and she does Lord of the Rings as well, but she's better than I mean, even though my renditionings are very good and solid, I just think, she probably went to school and really studied the craft of artistry. And you can go check her out and potentially go buy her stuff. Just look at my open subscriptions. So without further ado, to the Rohirrim we go. A noble clan, but a common clan. With king, but not necessarily poets, at least written. They were men of the West and men of the Mark, men of the horseman clan, the horseman's kingdom. And so, I want to start in The King of the Golden Hall is the chapter, and if you have the same book series as I, it's on page 118. So this is giving you a brief summary of the history of the riders of Rohan. "Look," said Gandalf, "how fair are the bright eyes in the grass. Ever mind they are called Simbelmeni in this land of men. For they blossom in all the seasons of the year, and grow where dead men rest. Behold, we are come to the great barrows, where the sires of Theoden sleep. 7 mounds upon the left, and 9 upon the right. No doubt, in my opinion, Tolkien got this from Beowulf and Beowulf's mound, and the mounds of the Viking chieftains, the Viking Norse kings. 7 upon the left, 7 mounds upon the left, and 9 upon the right," said Aragorn. "Many long lives of men it is since the Golden Hall was built. 500 times have the red leaves fallen in Mirkwood in my home since then," said Legolas. "And but a little while does that seem to us, 500 years. To the elves it seems like a little time, but to the lives of men, that's greater than this country, the United States of America. 500 years the nation has been. But to the riders of the Mark it seems so long ago," said Aragorn, "that the raising of this house is but a memory of song, and the years before are lost in the midst of time. Now they call this land their home, their own, and their speech is sundered from their northern kin." Then he began to chant softly in a slow tongue, unknown to the elf and dwarf, yet they listened, for there was a strong music in it. "That, I guess, is the language of the Rohirrim," said Legolas. "For it is like to this land itself, rich and rolling in part, and else hard and stern as the mountains, but I cannot guess what it means, save that it is laden with the sadness of mortal men. It runs thus in the common speech," said Aragorn, "as near as I can make it." I love how Aragorn knows languages that other people don't. It's awesome. "Where now the horse and the rider? Where's the horn that was blowing. Where is the helm and the Hornberg and the bright hair flowing? Viking culture, bros. Where's the hand on the harp string and the red fire glowing? Where's the spring and the harvest and the tall corn growing? They have passed like rain on the mountain, like a wind in the meadow. The days have gone down in the west, behind the hills, into shadow. Who shall gather the smoke of the dead wood burning, or behold the flowing years from the sea returning? Thus spoke a forgotten poet. Thus spoke a forgotten poet long ago in Rohan, recalling how tall and fair was Ero, the young, who rode down out of the north, and there were wings upon the feet of his steed, Thelaroth, father of horses. So men still sing in the evening. With these words the travelers passed the silent mounds. So they obviously were coming to the king of the Golden Hall. You know, Tolkien, in his description of the Golden Hall, definitely is describing a Norse chieftain longhouse. You know, one of the great halls of the Viking lords, the Viking thanes or Viking kings. And now, you know, we could describe many other things about the Rohirrim and their nobility and their, you know, humility. Obviously humble origins, not as great as Gondor, but still nonetheless noble. But I want to describe the other thing that I drew this morning, Helm's Deep, and the fortress of the Dwarven, whatever you want to call them, craftsman and construction worker or builder that he built on behalf of, I think, the people of Rohan, if I'm not mistaken. You can correct me if I'm wrong. People who know the Silmarillion better than I, even though I have read it. But yes, Helm Hammerhand crafted Helm's Deep, I think, on behalf of the Rohirrim people. I don't know what year, if it was at the beginning of Rohan's time or if it was in the middle, but it was a very mighty fortress and it had never fallen. And, you know, to my understanding, it was an unconquered fortress, even though, you know, in the movies they depict an explosion, and I'd have to reread to get a better understanding of how it actually goes down in the book. But I want to read the description that Tolkien gives of Helm's Deep, the fortress. The king and his riders passed on. Before the causeway that crossed the stream, they dismounted. In a long file they led their horses up the ramp. And passed within the gates of the Hornberg. There they were welcomed again with joy and renewed hope. For now there were men enough to man both the burg and the barrier wall. Quickly Éomer set his men in readiness. Yes, Éomer was there in the burg. The king and the men of his household were in the Hornberg, and there also were many of the Westfold men. But on the deeping wall and its tower and behind it, Éomer arrayed most of the strength that he had. For here the defense seemed more doubtful, if the assault were determined in great force. The horses were led far up the deep, under such guard as could be spared. The deeping wall was 20 feet high, and so thick that 4 men could walk abreast along the top, sheltered by a parapet over which only a tall man could look. Hence Gimli. So small he can't even look over the ramp. That's an awesome humorous addition to the Lord of the Rings movies, Mr. Peter Jackson. Can you see anything? Here and there were clefts in the stone through which men could shoot. This battlement could be reached by a stair running down from a door in the outer court of the Hornberg. 3 flights of steps led also up on the wall from the deep behind, but in front it was smooth, and the great stones of it were set with such skill that no foothold could be found at their joints, and at the top they hung over like a sea-delved cliff. It's just such an awesome thing, like how words can describe something so beautiful that eventually became a film. You know, Helms Deep probably won the Academy Awards just because of the grandeur of the structure and how the battle is set up and the heroes, and just think about it, like this all came from the imagination of a man, a soldier in World War One, and his wonderful words. Gimli stood leaning against the breastwork upon the wall. Legolas sat above on the parapet, fingering his bow and peering out into the gloom. This is more to my liking, said the dwarf, stamping on the stones. Ever my heart rises as we draw near the mountains. There is good rock here. This country has tough bones. I felt them in my feet as we came up from the dike. Give me a year and 100 of my kin, and I would make this a place that armies would break upon like water. I do not doubt it, said Legolas, but you are a dwarf, and dwarves are strange folk. I do not like this place, and I shall not like it no more by the light of day. But you comfort me, Gimli, and I am glad to have you standing nigh with your stout legs and your hard axe. I wish there were more of your kin among us, but even more would I give for 100 good archers of Mirkwood. We shall need them. The Rohirrim have good bowmen after their fashion, but there are too few here, too few. So you can obviously see where Peter Jackson, was getting, other armies from in the movies. Like, he's wishing for dwarves and elves to be at Helm's Deep, and, obviously in the movies, like a troop of elves show up before the 10,000 Uruk-hai. But yeah, it's awesome to read these stories and to actually see the inspiration of the movies through the author himself. And obviously I want to end it with a biblical reference as well. You obviously see the wonder of Tolkien's works and how awesome truly he was as a wordsmith. But I have 2 scripture references I want to read to you. Obviously, the battlement and the bloodiness you can read about, and I'll give you one description because it's awesome. So when Aragorn is coming back up, into the Hornberg, the berg itself, and when he was fighting on the battlement, Legolas had 1 arrow left, and as he's running up, basically Legolas saves Aragorn by sniping an orc, right? In the head, I'm pretty sure, if I remember right. As Aragorn tripped or something like that, and then he gets up and the door is shut, and they're in the Hornberg. But the description you can use as an author, it's awesome to read and think about, and oh, that wasn't in the movie, but right there in the book, So yeah, Legolas is awesome, and the friendship of those races is very unique and interesting. But on to Jeremiah, chapter 1, verse 18 to 19. It's obviously not as good. It's not going to be as long as the Ezekiel verse I read in the origins of evil with Sauron and comparing Sauron to Satan and Satan to Sauron. So 18 and 19, and then I want to read Psalm of David regarding fortresses. And I want you to understand the feeling of being in a keep and obviously having many foes coming to slay you. I mean, you get the feeling in the movie. You actually imagine when you're watching it, what if I was Aragorn? What if I was Legolas or Gimli or Éomer or, King Theoden? What if I was just that small boy hoping against hope to survive just the night? When Aragorn says to him, there is always hope. Whoever you are, young man or old age, or even stout and full of bravery, War is war, and it's fearsome and terrible. And if Tolkien were alive today, he'd look you in the face and tell you his understandings of war and hope and bravery in the midst of it. And I want to tell you about Jeremiah, a prophet of the Jews, who was born in a time where there was a lot of tumultuous chaos going on in Israel, kind of like today and kind of like modern America. And yet in the midst of it, God was speaking these words to that young man. Verse 18 of chapter 1. For, behold, I have made thee this day a defense city, a fortress. I have made thee this day a defense city, and an iron pillar, and brazen walls against the whole land, against the kings of Judah, against the princes thereof, against the priests thereof, and against the people of the land. And they shall fight against thee, but they shall not prevail against thee, for I am with thee, saith the Lord, to deliver thee. You know, Jeremiah was a young man when he was called to be a prophet of the Most High God. And he was scared, he was timid, he was not wanting to do the work of the Lord. But God put his words in that young man and also gave the young man bravery to do his will in the face of his foes, his own people and people that were not his own people. That's the kind of bravery and confidence God Almighty speaks into you. Like, hear me. Like, if I was speaking before my football team growing up, like, I'd be saying kind of the same things in the same tone, with the same confidence, the same bravery. Like, hear God's words through me. I am like your fortress. No matter who comes against you, you will withstand them. You will fight against them, and you will win. You will conquer. That is some powerful stuff. If you're hearing your Father in heaven say that to you, it gives you a kind of confidence that goes beyond that of other mortal men. That same man lived after the time of this other young man I want to read to you. His name was David. And David, what he wrote, and probably what he sensed the Holy Spirit speaking to him many years before the prophet Jeremiah, heard this from the Lord Most High. And when I was scared when playing football, I actually remember meditating on this verse and repeating it time and time again in my head. Freshman year and sophomore year. I started as a quarterback on the Hastings football team as a sophomore. Varsity football as a sophomore. I weighed like 150 some pounds, 55, 52, 54 pounds, fluctuated as a sophomore. By senior year, I was much bigger and braver, but I remember freshman and sophomore year having to fight fear. Like, I'm going up against dudes that are twice my weight, and I could break my neck and die. This is back when football wasn't a pansy sport still. Like, everybody's kind of dumbed things down, not just dumbed it down, but like, they've lost the touch of where football came from. It came from war. Like, the American sport of football came about after the Native American and American U.S. government wars. When young men didn't have any more battles to fight on this continent or abroad, overseas, they started the game of football. And it was violent, and it was meant to be violent. To train young men to be brave and to go into battle with bravery, the same bravery that football teaches you. There's a lot of real fear in football. Paralyzation, lots of different things that can happen to you with concussions and the like, broken bones, the least of which should be your concern. But yes, football was a sport of bravery. America is known as the land of the free and the home of the brave because of the games that we played, the things that we did in this country. Whether you're Native American, white American, brown American, black American, you better be brave. If you're not brave, you're not what an American's supposed to be. America, Amerigo, is the Spanish word that means home ruler. A good ruler is brave. A weak ruler submits to tyranny and lets evil go on underneath his nose. A brave warrior fights evil, conquers evil, and does good. So, Psalm 27, a psalm of David. Probably thinking back to when he was a boy, and then later on when he was a captain of 1,000 men, a garrison of men, just like Aragorn. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked, even mine enemies and my foes, came upon me to eat up my flesh, they stumbled and fell. Though an host, an army, should encamp against me, my heart shall not fear, shall know no fear. My heart shall not fear. Though war should rise against me, in this will I be confident. And then he goes on to speak of the peace and the grandeur and the glory and the confidence of the Lord Yah, his God. One thing have I desired of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. So obviously, as a soldier and as a warrior, if you give in to fear, then how will you lead those that you lead? If you're a fearful leader, how do your men follow you if you are fearful? Not very confidently. They're like, we don't want to fight for this guy. And you can kind of sense it. You can see it. You know, Legolas giving in to fear and Aragorn fighting against him before the men. Right? Nathadagathiah, he's like saying, and I shall die as one of them. If you die bravely. Don't go in fearful. If you have confidence in the Lord, whether you stand before men or know that your last breaths are nigh, fight bravely and live bravely and lead bravely. But don't lead stupidly. There's a difference between bravery that charges into battle without wisdom and wisdom that survives and lives to fight another day. Know the difference and apply rightly the way of wisdom. So yeah, that's Psalm 27. God is the one who gave David, the commander of thousands of men, confidence in battle and victory in battle. He led him from victory to victory. I want to also read this one as well. Chapter 18 of Psalms. I will love thee, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer. My God, my strength, in whom I will trust. My buckler and the horn of my salvation and my high tower. I will call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised. So shall I be saved from mine enemies. Amen. The Lord of the Rings and also the Bible itself gives great imagery of bravery and warriorhood, if you can call it that. The way of the warrior. And God is a dread warrior, a mighty warrior indeed. And, you know, David and even the Jews do remind me in some senses of the Rohirrim. But obviously the Rohirrim are more based on the Norse and Germanic and English peoples. I would say specifically the Norse, because I think Tolkien himself had an endearment to the Vikings and to their runes and their bravery in battle. But also the Germans as well, but I would say it was more so the Norse. Thinking about the horn of salvation, whenever a soldier in battle was in trouble, you didn't have like what you have today, walkie-talkies and cell phones and radar. You had your own voice, your own troop of men, and you had a horn. And if you were surrounded by your enemies, the only way you're calling for help is with somebody who's got a loud blast. And that's how they would communicate in war, was through the war horns, the shofars to the Jews and to the Vikings and to the Germans, ox horns. And so if you were in trouble, you would blow that horn a certain note, and from miles all around, whoever was in your company that was fighting would come to your aid, and hopefully soon. Otherwise, they would arrive to see you all dead. And so when David speaks about the horn of my salvation, I'm sure there were times in battle as a brave warrior would charge in and defeat many foes, but then all of a sudden, our bravery cost us. I mean, we're surrounded now. All of the enemy is gathered to us. Call on the horn, blow the horn. And so they would blow, and, they would line up in defense in a big circle and defend themselves until their help arrived. And I'm sure there were plenty of different times fighting against the Philistines where David was a little more aggressive than potentially he should have been, but he knew his troops were near and would have to come rescue him and his soldiers in their time of need. And then it would flip on them. So like the brave soldiers would defense and ball up and kill a bunch, and then they would defend, and then your troops that are maybe less brave and more strategic would come and flank the other troops and members, and thus you'd win a battle. I also like the high tower imagery. Later on in David's military career, he had a fortress. He was king over Hebron and then Jerusalem. For 7 years, he probably had a fortress in Hebron, and then eventually, at the age of 37, he conquered Jerusalem and united the whole of Israel, and then from there extended the borders even beyond what was promised to him, because he was a great military leader. And so, fighting from towers is very interesting and unique. It's not easy to conquer a fortress if you've prepared well. Obviously, you know about how they went underneath the fortress to conquer the Jebusites, I think it was, or whoever was conquering or living in Jerusalem at the time. And so I think with David, obviously, after you conquer many lands, what do? You fortify, you build your fortresses to where they become impregnable or impenetrable. And I think that David was also a genius military architect. And so they called one of them the Tower of David, but if you look at Jerusalem post Saul's reign, I'm sure that you could look at military architecture that was accredited to David and to his military mind. All right, I know what I've conquered in the past. How would I build so that forces who come against my city one day will not conquer me or my army? And so, I love thinking about God being his high tower. What is it about a high tower that makes you feel secure? It's a very fortifiable position. You're not easily hit from a tower, especially in ancient times, by arrows or catapults. It's very, very well protected, but high towers can see over the land. It's a long distance visual, if you will. And so having that long distance visual and living there and having watchmen on the high towers, it gives you an extra sense of security, an extra sense of, hey, if you see the enemy coming from a long way off, you have more time to prepare. If the enemy's already upon you, you're caught with your trousers off, you know what I mean? Or something like that. You gotta always be prepared. So having a high tower is necessary for visual and as well as defense. So thank you for listening. Hope that wasn't too long. And peace, Lord of the Rings nerds. Buy my book, love Viking culture, the Bible, and Lord of the Rings.